going to go ahead and get started since we only have an hour. I want to introduce myself. My name is Annie Maxfield. I work with PhDs in the Career Center. My colleagues Virginia Steinmetz and Trish Calloway are here too. They also work with PhDs. And this is held in conjunction with the Office of Postdoctoral Services, Molly Starback, and David Steinbrenner in the back. So this is all going to be recorded and posted in case you want to go back and revisit some of the answers from the panelists. Today we're doing careers in biotech. It's our kickoff to a series of careers in ... other areas, and you'll see those kind of pop up monthly. I am going to start by having our panelists introduce themselves, and then I'll lead into some of the questions that were submitted by you. But please, if you have questions, raise your hand, and we'd like to kind of start getting it from the audience too, okay? So without further ado, I'll start with Donna. Okay. And if you could each just kind of tell us about yourselves, a little bit about your career path and what you're doing now.
Okay. Well, my name is Donna Bortner, and I was an undergraduate at Penn State University, where I got my BS degree in microbiology. I then worked for a year at a government research lab in Ames, Iowa, the National Animal Disease Center, before I decided to go back to graduate school. I then came to Duke and went to graduate school here. I received my PhD in microbiology and immunology. In fact, I gave my dissertation defense seminar in this very room many, many years ago. I then went on to do a postdoctoral fellowship at GlaxoSmithKline. And I was interested in this particular postdoc opportunity for two main reasons. The first was the science, because it was an opportunity to extend my graduate training, which focused on studying oncogene signal transduction pathways in biochemical and cell systems to the in vivo setting, with the opportunity to develop transgenic tumor genesis models, and I was very interested in that. And then the second reason was the opportunity to get exposure to research in the pharmaceutical industry setting, to see if that was an environment that I would like and whether that was a career path that I was interested in pursuing. Well, obviously it was, because after I completed my postdoc, I was offered an investigator position and accepted that and stayed at GSK for over 15 years. During that time frame, I moved from a role starting as a bench scientist to various managerial positions, where I mainly oversaw research activities that were focused on applying genomic technologies to drug discovery and development in various therapeutic areas, and with a main emphasis on genetically modified rodent models. And then about 2 years ago, GSK was ramping up its move towards outsourcing a lot of their front-end discovery research activities. And two of my GSK colleagues and I decided to form a company, Transvirogen. We thought about this and thought that this trend toward outsourcing was not limited to GSK, but more industry-wide. And we were hopeful that there would be an opportunity that we, as a company, could become one of the outsourced providers, and that's how Transvirogen came about. Transvirogen is a preclinical in vivo research services company. We focus on the design, the generation, characterization, and study usage of genetically modified rodent models. And we currently are providing services to a variety of clients in academic, government, biotech, and pharmaceutical institutions. And I'm serving as a company CEO.
My name is Laura Falkner, and I'm currently with the Center of Innovation for Nanobiotechnology. I took a pretty wandering path to where I'm at now. I'd like to say that it was by design, but it really wasn't. I started in a forensic science bachelor degree program at Virginia Commonwealth University, and I did an externship, which is like a condensed internship where you basically shadow an expert for 2 weeks. And I thought for a while that I wanted to be a forensic pathologist. And then when I almost passed out, like my second day shadowing, I realized that that probably wasn't for me. So I started looking at other opportunities that I could use the scientific background that I had gotten, and realized that I didn't really want to work in a forensic laboratory and use those skills. So I took an internship in a microbiology and immunology research lab. And I stayed on that internship for 6 months, and then they hired me as a full-time research assistant on top of my full-time undergrad studies. And that was really an interesting experience for me. I got to the experience of basic science and publications, and that really prompted me into graduate school. And so I wanted to do something challenging, and so I started a PhD program in biomedical engineering at UNC Chapel Hill. And during my time at Chapel Hill, I got experience in more the clinical side of research. So I was working on a medical imaging technology preparing for clinical trials, and so it started me thinking along the path of translating the technology actually into the clinic and into the market eventually. One of the projects there actually involved nanomaterials, and I just got really excited about nanomaterials, and so I decided to take a class on nanomaterials while I was still getting my PhD, and I took that class, and then I really liked it, and so then I found an internship with Lux Research, which is a nanotechnology consulting firm. So that gave me a lot of experience on the market research and translation and business model aspect of the science. And so I worked at Lux for about 5 months in the internship, and then I took an internship with the company that I now work with, which turned into a full-time position, and I'm the Director of Innovation Projects there.
My name's Nick Trotta. I'm originally from Pennsylvania. I did my undergraduate degree at a little place called Lafayette College in biology and English. Started graduate school at the University of Utah in neurobiology, and my advisor was sort of run out of town, and so I went with him to Vanderbilt, where I finished my PhD. I'm sort of a neurophysiologist by training, and then came to Duke for a postdoc in 2005 in the neurobiology department. Again, working with a mouse model of obsessive compulsive disorder. It was a really exciting project. I really enjoyed my time. But the bench and I had an amiable separation around 2007. I think we're both better off without each other. And I moved to a small startup company here in RTP called Affinergy. It's a small medical device company. Affinergy makes peptide-based coatings for medical devices in order to facilitate drug delivery. Everyone, I'm sure, has heard of drug-eluting stents, other different drug device combinations that Affinergy is working on. After about 3 years at Affinergy, I decided to try something a little different. I came back to Duke and was doing some project management, project planning. I see some of my former coworkers here, so I would ask you to please not reveal how briefly I was here during that spell. After that stint at Duke, I got a position at another medical device company called Advanced Liquid Logic, where I currently am. There I'm a project manager working mostly with our research and applied silo of products. We're building one product for sample preparation for next generation sequencing. I'm sure a lot of you rely on next gen sequencers for your work, so you understand how exciting that area is. We're also working on some products for point of care diagnostics for HIV and a couple other things in newborn screening. So my role there is largely market research, business development. I still do a lot of grant writing. We write a lot of small business grants, so that would certainly be an area of leverage that a lot of you would have with the small business community here in RTP. Happy to be here.
All right. I'm Shobha Patswati. I guess I did my bachelor's and master's in India. My master's was in medical microbiology. I came here for my PhD. It was in retroviral genetics. I was in the New Jersey area. It was a joint program between Robert Wood Johnson Medical School and Rutgers, sort of a new program at that time. During my master's, I knew that my career would be in industry. So when I finished my PhD, it was a no-brainer. There was no dilemma there. I was in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and I chose to go to Millennium Pharmaceuticals to do an industry postdoc. In Millennium was bought a couple of years ago by Takeda for about $9 billion. People thought I was crazy because I was right there. I could have applied to Harvard or MIT for a postdoc, and I could have. I was in the right field. I was in gene therapy. I had publications, everything. But since I knew that I wanted to be in industry, it was a no-brainer for me. I ended up being there for about 2.5 years as a postdoc, and then they absorbed me as a full-time scientist. I was there for about a total of 7 years or so. During that time, I really enjoyed my time there. I was exposed to a wide variety of things, kind of got a feel for the entire spectrum of drug discovery through to development, got to see the patients who actually would benefit from the medicines that we were helping make. And I also realized at that point that I liked the business aspect of things. So when I came down to North Carolina, I looked around and I felt the best place for me to be at this time was the Biotech Center. And right now my role there is the Technology Development Director and part of the business group. And what I do is I work with all the startup companies in the state, startup life science companies. So it could be one day I work with an ag biotech company and see what they need. Another day it could be a nanobiotech company or a medical device, cardiovascular, oncology, anything, name it. So every week I meet with founders of different companies and try and help them with their needs. It could be in whatever aspect. It could be for funding them, because we do fund them, so I do a lot of due diligence on these companies. Or it could be for just providing them with resources that they need to grow their companies. So that's my primary role at the center. And the secondary role is, of course, I direct the Industrial Fellows program as well.
What do you see as the main differences between academic science and industry science and biotech?
From my perspective, I'd say one of the main differences is the focus of the research and the freedom of pursuing different angles. So in the industry setting, the funding is for a specific area. And similar to academia, but in academia, if you find interesting findings on a tangential path, you have more of the freedom to pursue that. Whereas in the industry setting, it's more focused on what the end goal is. And even though you may have an interesting finding that's aside to that, there's not necessarily the opportunity to pursue that. How that's handled is we typically seek out an academic investigator in a similar field to, see if they want to collaborate and pick up on that. So, my perspective.
Well, actually, I guess in industry, well, to begin with, the advantages are, you have a lot more resources. There's more money. You get a lot of training, different aspects. The benefits are much better. But the advantage with and small companies, you get to wear multiple hats. There's not much money, but you could, what you might learn in a big company in maybe 8 years, you could learn that in 2 years. You would be forced to learn that in 2 years in a small company. And but in academia, I think it's you're a master of one thing in academia. I sort of feel you're sort of a jack of all trades in industry.
Are there any engineers in the building? Okay, I think academic engineering is unique in that you are trying to build something applied, and it's okay if it works with gator clips and golf ball sized pieces of solder and stuff like that. Whereas our group is, we're trying to build something that works every single time you turn it on. And I would say that's a difference, as opposed to just having an approach that is going to work, for a publication. Something that's going to work for a customer is, as hard as peer review is, nothing's tougher than customers, right? So that's a little bit different. And to echo Don's point about, finding something interesting on a tangential path, nothing enrages your project manager more than exactly that. So even though it's fascinating and interesting and all those things, it just creates a dilemma as what you do with that. So.
We work with a lot of small companies in the organization that I work for now, and one of the things that really can be detrimental to a small company is having too many foci, that they get distracted and they're trying to go down too many paths. Really, in an industry, you've got a limited number of chances to fail, and if you fail too many times, the company will go away. And so you have to stay focused. You might find some really interesting things along the way, but you have to kind of tuck that away and focus on getting your lead product out the door.
So along those lines, what would you recommend for postdocs and PhDs? They're interested in going into industry. How do they start to make that transition?
Internships is probably one of the best ways. A lot of the small companies have internship programs. They may not advertise them very well, but a lot of it is relationships. If you educate yourself about a company and you know that you're a good fit for that company, and you reach out to somebody in that company and ask them about opportunities and create a relationship, you're a lot more likely to be able to get your foot in the door for an internship and then potentially later for a position, a full-time position. So I would say to try to build those relationships early. When you see a company that you're interested in is going to be giving a talk locally, go listen to the talk to the people that gave this talk afterwards, and just get to know them.
I seriously do think that, you should choose your workplace. Don't have the workplace choose you. I mean, if you decide, you have to do the research and the background, but if you put in the effort to figure out which would be the right workplace for you, and then you kind of focus on that and make sure you're the right fit for that, it will happen. And that way, I think it's more strategic, so you end up spending out maybe half a dozen resumes as opposed to a couple hundred.
Yeah, and I would echo Laura's point on the relationships. Networking, I think is key. Building those relationships, getting a foot in the door. Even if you're applying for a position, having an internal contact within the company that you can directly send your CV to, as opposed to having to go through the HR filter and you don't know if your CV will ever reach the hiring manager. So building those relationships, having a network, seeking out what you excel in and what is the good fit for you. You're basically selling yourself to a hiring manager. And when you send your CVs, tailor your CV and your cover letter for each specific position. Don't have just a generic CV that you send out. Tailor, sell yourself. What is it that you have to offer that would make you a key advantage for that hiring manager?
We have an internship program at Coin, and one of the first things that will get a resume into the maybe or the no stack, I have a yes, no, and maybe, is if I can tell that they did not take the time to make it specific to that position. If you can't even take the time to do that, then I'm probably not going to be interested in bringing you on as an intern. And so that's just a real world example, and I'm sure that there's lots of other people that have similar selection criteria.
And so industry isn't just one big thing, right? I think giving some thought to your specific brand and who you are, what your abilities are, and what kind of stuff you want to do. If you're super detail oriented, then quality and regulatory might be your thing. If you really like to write, there are specific things for you. I'm a writer by nature. I know that about myself. I looked for writing positions straight out of grad school for my first industry job. Find that thing that is your differentiator, and then build your brand around that. Do things related to that. For writing, if you can start to write reviews or other grants, or join groups around here that are medical writing associations and things like that. Build that brand and make sure what you get across in a resume is what you really like to do. If you can tell that a person really likes to do this kind of work, that really goes a long way.
And that'll usually be visible in the interview, because when we have two candidates and their resumes are very similar, the key differentiator at that point is how enthusiastic is this person, how passionate are they about what they're doing. it can compensate for some lack of skills, passion, enthusiasm, and what you bring to the table. If you have the right set of skills, but you just don't bring that enthusiasm and your interest to want that position, you might not get that.
I've definitely taken interns into our program that did not have the classic background, but they were bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and willing to learn, and so they got the internship, and some of them did phenomenally.
I guess along those same lines, what are the things, you said tailor the resume, what are the things that are specifically looked for on a resume in industry that might be different from the academic positions? Or are they very similar?
Relevant work experience. I never want to see that you waited tables at this place if you're applying for a research position. It needs to really be tailored to that. And when you're describing your past work experience, you can tailor the way that you describe your past work experience to support what you know the job skills that are required for that position are, which might be very different if you're applying for something like a writing job as opposed to a bench research job. So really drive it down so that there's never a work experience that I look at and say, okay, irrelevant. Make everything that's on there completely relevant.
And I like to see the key accomplishments sort of in the first 1/3 of the first page. The top 1/3 of the first page. Your key highlights, everything that you've accomplished. If you don't know what you've accomplished and you can't sort of articulate it or put it on paper, I'm not going to know. Don't have your key accomplishments at the end of the second page. Try to get everything you can in the first 10, 15 seconds of reading a resume right on top, and try not to get it into especially if you're looking for industry positions, don't make it too sort of down in the weeds sort of language. Try to make it more broad, more layman terms. But the whole idea is try to get to the meat of the matter. Don't talk about, we looked at this effect in these mice, but try to get to what disease, where would the impact be? Ultimately, we want to see the impact. How is it going to help mankind? If you can, or what disease pathway, something, get to the bottom line as soon as you can.
And quantify your contribution to that as well. If you only had a small role, but that role grew, or different things that you can quantify nuggets instead of, I learned to use this piece of equipment. That's not as interesting as I increased the workflow on this piece of equipment by tenfold or something like that.
And I would say to work in not only experience your accomplishments, say on the scientific side if it's for a research position, but also your traits and characteristics that contributed to that being successful and how that would apply in the industry setting. I'd say that one of the key differences in, again, a research position between academia and industry is that it's more of a team environment. So not only are recruiters looking for people who have the scientific skills, but the collaborative skills, the teamwork, to be able to fit in with that team and work well as a team to progress the research and not work in isolation as your own entity. So however you can work that into your resume in your accomplishments to come out, that's an advantage as well.
Yeah, and make sure the words that you use to describe those characteristics are the words that your references are going to use, right? Like, make sure that we sync that up, that when you tell us that you're enthusiastic and whatever it is, that your advisor is going to say the same thing when we call them, because sometimes there's a disconnect there, and then it's tough to know who to believe.
Yeah, and I'd say references are key. Having good references, well-regarded references who are willing to sell you to the hiring manager. It's marketing yourself and having others who will do that marketing for you.
And then other things that aren't necessarily even work related, but that show if you're going from academic to industry, you're changing lanes pretty dramatically. So what have you done to kind of show that you've already started changing lanes? You know what I mean? That you've already started doing that. Can you read a patent? Can you put together any kind of do you know what net present value is? It's just stuff like that. I mean, even basic accounting. Do you know that? Anything like that that you think is pertinent to the job, if there's something that our group doesn't have to teach you, man, that's just one more thing, you know what I mean? That's just one more feather in your cap, especially a small place like us. I mean, people ask what I do, and I just say I do what needs done, right? I mean, that's just how our group works. And so whatever we can throw you into, we had people apply who, for bench positions, but then they took the patent agent exam and passed it. I mean, that's just a massive skill. I mean, I've been trying to read patents for 5 years. I'm still terrible at it. So if I can get somebody in to help me with that, man, that's just such a feather in their cap. So.
Yeah, volunteer at places where you can expand your skill sets. If you want to learn some new skills, just go and volunteer your time, even if it's only a few hours a week. Try and get some certificate courses under your belt. Things that just a week-long course or maybe a 3-month course or something like that. That shows that you're sort of taking the steps to get to where you need to be.
One of the things that I did was I took a Business Essentials certificate course at UNC because I knew squarely that I wanted to make that jump from science to the business of science. And I didn't want to run into any potential employers saying, okay, great, you're interested in it, but have you proven that you can do it? And why am I going to be the one to take the risk if you can't do it? And so I wanted to demonstrate to a potential employer that I knew I wanted to do it. I was willing to invest the time to demonstrate that I could do it and that it was a legitimate long-term interest of mine.
Yeah.
I had a question for Donna.
Mm-hmm.
Can you give us a little synopsis of this transition to your own company? Like, what kind of barriers did you have to get by in terms of, I'm sure you guys came up with the idea while you're at the company. What kind of paperwork needs to go into that? Like, was it difficult for you to do the company?
Yeah, well, I should come clean on this because I was kind of vague in how the events transpired. My entire department, my entire division actually was let go from GSK. So it was an opportunity that created itself. What am I going to do next? And that's a trend, in the big pharma industry. There certainly were challenges because here you had a group of 3 scientists that were now looking to form a company. And fortunately, one of my co-founders, has an MBA, so she brought some of the business side with us. But it was a major learning experience. And what we did, we sought out a business advisor. We actually have a partnership with UNC. And it was key for us. We had a business advisor who served as a consultant for us on those matters that we needed to get the company off the ground. We needed to get a legal firm in place to help us with the company founding documents, to get contracts in place. We needed banking options and insurance coverage. I mean, there are just so many things that, going from science to running your own business that, unless you've done it, it's learning as you go along. So I think, a key for us, again, was having the networking, having a consultant that could help guide us along the way.
And actually, to make it less daunting for those who are thinking of starting their own companies, that's why the Biotech Center is there, because we have access to all those people that she just mentioned, the accountants, the attorneys, the people from commerce, from Department of Commerce for the state of North Carolina. We have all of those people in our database, and they've already committed to helping entrepreneurs, and they're willing to help these entrepreneurs at pro bono or discounted rates or long equity, whatever it might take, whatever the entrepreneur can afford. To their terms, to help them with whatever needs to be done to get your company up and running.
At the risk of sounding like I'm, brown-nosing, I probably wouldn't have my career if it weren't for the Biotech Center. I think both companies that I've worked with now have had major support from the Biotech Center, and they are there to help entrepreneurs and grow the biotech and medical product community in this area. And if you're able to start a company and hire 5 people, I mean, that means the world to our industry and our group. It's a very tight-knit community down here. It's not California and it's not Boston, but it's got a lot of advantages over both of those places. So, and the Biotech Center is one of them. So they've been invaluable to both places I've worked. So sorry if that's overdoing it.
I wouldn't have a job either without the Biotech Center.
Question in the back.
Yeah, I had a question. If you're, a postdoc looking to get into industry, what are the advantages and disadvantages of maybe starting in big pharma or starting in biotech? I know maybe big pharma would give you some credibility to your resume, but biotech you might learn more skills faster. So.
Good answer.
I guess
For me, I had a couple of opportunities on the table, and I work for a nonprofit, so we're not a nanobiotech startup, but we work with a lot of the startups. But we're a 4-person team, and I had an opportunity to go do business development at at Vanderbilt University Institute for Imaging Sciences, which is a pretty strong group there. And so it was a trade-off. Do you want to build your resume and make a lot of really valuable contacts in industry, or do you want to be a really big part of something small that could be big? And that was the trade-off that I took. One of the nice things about the biotech space is that it's okay to fail. If you go to a company that doesn't make it, that's okay. It's a learning experience. If you're on the boat while it's sinking, just learn as much as you can about the early signs that the boat was going to sink, because that's a good skill set to take with you to the next time.
So I've been in both. I've been in large pharma and now my own small biotech, and there are pros and cons to both. It used to be job security was a key thing. That you go to large pharma, you're pretty much set for life. Well, I was for 15 years. That's a long term, but that's not the case anymore. I'd say job security is probably equivalent in the two. On the biotech side, as Laura said, it's a more entrepreneurial environment. You have everybody that's invested in the same, smaller common goal, as opposed to maybe in the larger environment, you're one cog in the wheel. But, on the flip side, in the larger company, you probably have more resources. Funding for, equipment, reagents, any high-end research that you can justify, you can probably get the funding for, whereas on the biotech side, that funding is going to be much more limited. In both, I'd say you have the exposure to, the whole business. In large pharma, you're pretty much confined to working on your aspect of it, but you get exposed to the entire drug discovery and development process, whereas in biotech, you may have smaller biotech, more of the opportunity to actually have hands-on experience in multiple things. So, there are pros, in my opinion, pros and cons to both.
I guess in a small company, you have the opportunity to sort of rise higher much quickly than you would in a big company. You sort of, like she said, you're a cog in a wheel there, and so you might be limited to the same position. And I guess internally there'd be a lot of competition as well if you wanted to go up. But within a small company, you might be able to rise faster.
As far as for career building, I think you nailed it, right? I think if I get a resume from a big company, from a person who's worked at a big company, I know they understand commercial processes and quality systems and some of the things that are just required if you're bringing a product to market that maybe somebody who worked at a smaller company really wouldn't be familiar with. And that stuff really is important. The more people you have who are familiar with that stuff, the better, because it's complicated. There's some complicated processes that go into that stuff. I think another way to frame it is, so from a career building aspect, it just sort of is, they're both just about, I think as Shobha said, right, you either build these core commercialization capacity in that large company, or in a small company, you get battlefield promotions a lot faster, and maybe you don't know what you're doing all the time, right? I think the other part is what frustrates you more, right? Does it frustrate you more to be sort of a small piece in a large machine, or does it frustrate you more to have a bunch of stuff thrown on you that you're just sort of triaging and just dealing with it? I'm way more frustrated at kind of being a number, and so I'd much rather be a prominent member of a sort of under-resourced team. That works better for. I am less frustrated in that environment.
So most of you, it sounds sounds like you began in a temporary position that developed into a permanent job or even a career. Is that common, or is that more specific to your situation?
Well, for me, at GSK, at the time that I went to do a postdoc there, they had a formal postdoc program, so there were more opportunities maybe than there are right now to take that jump, to do a postdoc, get exposed to that environment. If you didn't like it, you could always go back and do an academic postdoc, you know, so it wasn't you're down this path and that's it. I'd say it was more the exception to get offered a permanent position after that. It wasn't a normal transition. Okay, you did a postdoc there, now there's a full-time position that opened up for you. It's just a matter of an opportunity, what opportunities there were at the time. Again, being good at what you do and enthusiastic about, if you are interested in, if there is that opportunity. But in my case, I'd say it was more the exception than, the expectation.
I think typically maybe only 10 to 20% of those people who complete their postdocs in industry would stay on at that particular company. Most of them will move on to other places.
In our intern program, we bring in, I don't know, between 8 and 15 a year, something like that. And I want to say we hire something like that number, maybe 10%. And I wouldn't say it's that's because we're being that selective. We probably want to hire maybe 50%, but the other 50% have a boyfriend in Washington D.C. or aren't done with school yet, or what, life gets in the way. So we try to convince them that it's harder to find a good job than a good boyfriend, but that hasn't been successful yet.
I think for me, mostly it was just luck and being at the right place at the right time. And once I got into a position, I just really devoted myself to it and was able to demonstrate significant value to the organization in a short period of time, such that they saw that it would be more valuable to keep me on than it would be to bring in a different intern and have to train them again, or to hire somebody else that wasn't as immersed in the projects as I was. So for Coin's internship program, when interns come in, I tell them that you can get as much or as little out of this as you want. I'm not going to hold your hand through it. I'll mentor you, but I'm not going to baby step everything. And so the interns that really dive deep and grab a hold of their projects and do well are actually the ones that we end up giving some type of contract work to afterwards. We're considering hiring one of our current ones for a junior level position in the organization. Now, we don't always have opportunities to hire them into, but you never know when you'll just be at the right place at the right time. I was for undergrad, and then for grad school, I just kind of was there at the right time, and there were 2 interns in that program, and I was the one that got hired.
I mean, luck does play a role, like you said, but you have to be strategic as well.
Right, you have to strategically put yourself in the right place to get lucky.
You make your own luck, a little
Yes.
bit, to some degree.
Along those lines, I'm just going to follow this up, and then I'll come to you. Along those lines, are there some things that you could do during the internship that will absolutely keep you out of contention, like the no-nos?
Be reliable. If you say that you're gonna be in at a certain time, even if your advisor says that you have flexible times to be in and out, don't just disappear for a week. No show, no call, no nothing. That's a guaranteed way to not be offered a position. And be responsive. If somebody asks you to do something, do it. And if you don't know how to do it, don't say, okay. It's okay to say, I don't know how to do this. Can you help me get started?
And please don't, and this is impossible for you guys not to do. I know how, I was once an academic scientist. I know how this works. Please don't freelance, right? Don't there's an old adage in sports that don't think it hurts the ball club, right? Try not to get too creative with the kinds of things you want to do. If we can, as we pointed out earlier, and especially with a small group like ours, we're working on a shoestring budget. We can't diverge too much from what from the path that we need to stay on. So there might be creative, interesting ideas out there, but please write them down and report them and talk about them. But you know what I mean. We need to kind of keep the blinders on with what we're doing on a day-to-day basis.
I'd say if you're in a temporary role, you want to be acting in that role as if you were in a full-time position. That you want to make that employer notice you and want to hire you. So it comes back to some of the characteristics I was mentioning about, you want to come out in your CV. Display those. You want to be honest, you want to have integrity, you want to show teamwork, you want to show passion and enthusiasm, and you want to excel in what you do. You want to have a really strong work ethic and make sure that comes out every day, and they'll notice you.
Another thing that you can do too is try to take advantage of the connections that you can make while you're there, because even if the company that you're working for can't hire you or won't hire you, you can meet people while they're either customers of the company or collaborators with the company that you can then go into for another internship or for a potential position.
I think the key is timeline, because I think the difference between a wish and a goal is the timeline. So you can wish all you want to become a permanent employee there, but if you make it your goal and you kind of set yourself some timelines on how you're going to achieve that as a goal, it's more likely that you'll end up becoming a permanent employee there. Yeah.
And let the people that are working with you there at the company know that that's your goal. If they think that you could care less and that you've got these other opportunities that you're ready to move on to afterwards, then if they're considering hiring you, it may be a passing thought as opposed to knowing that that's really what you want, and if they see it's a good fit, then it coming to reality.
I have a question for Laura. You mentioned that you took the Business Essentials Certificate at UNC.
Yes.
I don't know at what point you took that.
I took that in, I think it was 2008 or 2009, and that was another one of those right place, right time. It's actually a pretty expensive certificate program, but it was when they were first launching it, so I was in the pilot program, so I got to take it for free.
Okay, is that the summer program, or is it running through the year?
Because it was the pilot, I don't really know. But it was all online, and so it was self-paced, and you had a certain amount of time to be able to finish it in, but I did finish it pretty rapidly, and it was interesting. And at the time I was taking it, I was interning with Lux, so that had to be 2009. And when I was taking it, I was doing these things for Lux that I was just kind of going through the motions. They told me what to do, and I was able to do it, but I didn't understand why I was doing it. And so then when I was taking the class continually, I was like, that's why they want this information. And it made what I was doing that much more exciting and interesting.
So that was behind my question was, what did it contribute to your overall advancement? And you just basically answered that.
Yeah, that and it gave me credibility when I started applying for jobs. That when I was I interviewed for multiple jobs, but I ended up with 2 offers on the table. When I was interviewing for the jobs, they would notice that I had done that. So it gave me a talking point to say this is why I did that, so that in the interview I could point that out and really robustly discuss it. And it also, I think that it probably contributed to even my resume being in the stack that got interviewed.
So we'll see whether it still exists.
It's still there.
It is. And that's not limited to somebody who's already enrolled in a program at UNC. I take it that any adult could enroll in.
Right.
If they have the money.
Right.
Yeah. I've seen that students in engineering typically tend to do an internship of the summer before they graduate or sometime before they defend. So is that how it works in science as well, or do you look for internship after your graduation?
For PhDs, I mean, it's not that easy to find internships in the life sciences. You basically finish your PhD and then you look for some sort of a contract position or a postdoc, or you were lucky to get an internship. That doesn't happen very often because, people don't think you'll be able to contribute significantly in a matter of 3 months or so. Most life science projects tend to be longer, so those are harder to come by.
I think if you're looking for a research internship, that is definitely true. If you're interested or willing to kind of get involved more on the business side of things, you might find some more opportunities because there's not that huge learning curve to get up to speed on what the company is actually, the science behind their product. You can get involved on some of the other science-related things, but more business-oriented.
One thing that I experienced at GSK that's kind of along those lines, so as Shobha said, there's in the life sciences, on the research area, it is more difficult. Those opportunities just are not there. But we had the opportunity to have graduate students and postdocs come into GSK and work in our facilities where we were doing collaborative work with academic investigators. So, I mean, that's one approach. If you know you want to get some exposure to the industry setting, research setting before making that leap, if you can make connections with scientists in industry that could maybe be potentially collaborative with your PI, that they forge a relationship and then there's an opportunity for, cross work between the facilities. That's one mechanism by which that could occur.
I think it's critical to examine what is it that what makes you tick, because not all industry jobs are the same, and depends on if you're in a company that makes products that customers use. The kind of job you'd have there as a PhD scientist would be very different. You would be a field application scientist, or you'd be a technical expert who basically does troubleshooting for the customers. But if you're an R&D company, there your role is going to be different. So you need to decide what is it that you want, what is it that you like doing and enjoy doing, and then choose a company based on that.
And if you don't know, if you think that you like something, then approach somebody and ask to do an externship. Ask to shadow them for a couple of days, because I have a strong stomach. I quickly learned that forensic pathology was not for me. And you might quickly realize that. I mean, I did the internship that I did with Lux Research was phenomenal for having me be able to understand the market drivers for the technologies and understand how the business models contribute to the success of the technologies in the marketplace. But I quickly realized that I was going to be sitting behind a computer all day, every day, and that was all I was going to do for a long time. And I probably would have accepted a job there if they had offered it to me, but the economy went away, and so they weren't able to offer me a position anyway, so I didn't have to make that choice. But by getting immersed into some things that you feel like maybe you're interested in, maybe not, you can really get a grip more quickly on, is this something that I want to commit to spending a couple of months or years figuring out this actually wasn't right for me, as opposed to rapidly learning. And by doing the externships, it's kind of a way to build a relationship that maybe you could leverage that for an internship or a job.
Advantages of doing an industry postdoc, like a postdoctoral program that some of the companies have, not quite as many anymore, versus seeking out just some position which you think might. I think it's harder to find those positions coming out of graduate school, coming from a basic science background, to jump right into some random other position versus a postdoc position, something maybe a little more familiar. So what are some of the advantages of seeking that out versus jumping right into something different?
Well, that's exactly what I did. I went from receiving my PhD to a postdoc in industry. And the advantage for me was the opportunity to get exposure to that environment to see if it was the right fit for me. Is that something I was going to be passionate about, working in that environment, which is different from academia. So the advantage is it's an opportunity without a long-term commitment. if you take that path, you realize you don't like it, that does not exclude you from moving back into academia if you decide you want to go that route. As far as that versus a more permanent type of position, at least from the life sciences area in a research position, I think it's very difficult without postdoctoral experience, having a PhD without postdoctoral experience to move into a permanent type of position. If you want a research position, you're typically going to need postdoctoral experience.
Unless you apply for like a contract research organization. I'll just give you an example. He's not on the panel here, but my husband. He's a toxicologist by training, and right off, as soon as he finished his PhD, he got a permanent position, but it was at a contract research organization. And so I think in those sort of companies, you could get directly right after a PhD without a postdoc.
And also field dependent. I
Yeah.
believe in the chemistry field, for example, the postdoctoral experience is not as critical. That chemists are hired in, directly without postdoctoral experience. So it depends on your field and the company.
Or looking for organizations that tend to hire a lot of junior level scientists, like RTI. They hire a lot of people fresh out of PhD programs into junior level research positions.
Could you explain a little bit more about the contract research positions and what? I'm kind of too familiar with what you guys are doing.
Oh, actually, North Carolina is the CRO capital.
There's 108 life science focused CROs in North Carolina.
So these are companies that will do clinical trials for pharmaceutical companies. These are companies that will do small animal studies, preclinical studies for you. They might do, little kits. They might do consulting companies. A wide variety. I mean, she would
Transvirogen is a contract research.
She would be a CRO. And you may want to talk about what kind of services you provide.
Right. So we contract in vivo research services. So it's around animal in vivo types of studies we develop for clients, transgenic mouse models, knockout models. Any variety of mouse and rat models. We do rat work as well. We have a viral vector arm to our business where we will design and develop viral vectors that we will either then use for in vivo studies for our customers or pass those on to them. So it's a contract research organization is basically providing research services for that customer.
We have a lot of chemistry companies here that will synthesize compounds. They'll do a lot of troubleshooting for you. They'll do a large scale up of compounds for you and all sorts of things. So we have a large number of companies here that are contract research organizations.
And this is very much the way the world is headed, right? I mean, I think we've all now heard of all the big pharma companies hacking out their R&D sections and selling them off or shutting them down or whatever, and this is where it's going to go. I think in a lot of areas, technology is moving so quickly that big pharma just doesn't want to plunk in the investment to try to keep up. For next-gen sequencing, for example, I don't know of any big pharmas that are implementing that technology because it's moving too fast for them to keep up with. They'd much rather work with a CRO that is specialized for that discipline and will tell them what they should be, the kinds of technology they should be using. And so, if you have a sort of a domain discipline, that would work out for a CRO, that it's growing very rapidly, and I think North Carolina's biotech economy, is going to rely pretty heavily on that for a long time. We are as we point out, this is the mecca of CROs. So.
Let's go back here and then we'll come back up here.
Okay, you just mentioned postdoc training experience is kind of important for getting a permanent position in life science field. So I heard that if you do a long postdoc, say 5 years, it kind of hurt your chance of getting, compared to shorter postdoc training experience people. Is that true? Is there a cap, how long you can be a postdoc before successfully getting out?
The real answer is really it depends on the company. I mean, I'll just give you last year, because I run the Industrial Fellows Program, we had a couple of applicants there who had about 8 years experience after their PhD. And while we typically don't want to see that, companies love that because now they're getting someone with that much more experience for the same price as someone with just 2 years of post-PhD experience. So it really, the true answer is it's not a given. It may hurt, it may not hurt, it depends on the company that you're applying to.
I think one of the ways that it could be beneficial is if you're continuing to grow your responsibilities and your skill set. If you do a 4, 5, 6 year postdoc and it's all the same thing, then that could look more like you're kind of stagnating, as opposed to if you do maybe 2 different postdocs with different skill sets and different groups, so that you're building your experiences.
At ALL, we hired our director of biochemistry, who was at Duke for 17 years, prior to his first industry position, which was a few years ago. But he's been with us, I don't know, whatever it is, 6 or 7 years now. But he was nearly a 20-year Duke veteran, and we plucked him out. Now he's incredibly old, and I make fun of him all the time for it. But we'd be lost without him. You know what I mean? He's transitioned beautifully from an academic setting to an industry setting. Nobody should punish you for doing the work that you like to do. And if this is the setting that lets you do the work you like to do, that's the right place for you to be. And then if there's another setting where you can do the kind of work you like to do that's an industry setting, that's where you should go. And if you have that domain expertise, no one's going to punish you for having 10, 12 years experience in an important area. So.
Yeah, as long as that experience is relevant for the position and you've been productive, I don't think it's viewed necessarily as a negative.
Yeah, no one cares who wrote your paycheck.
All right, let's do the last question.
So I'm sure there'll be bias in this answer, but what companies do you think are up and coming or show the most potential that are in the area right now?
We have a long list. I'd be happy to share that with you.
It's your turn. I did the Biotech Center, now you have to do Advanced Liquid Logic.
Oh, yes. Yes, here's right here, one of our shining stars. No, but you'll find that majority of the companies in North Carolina, even if you call them up and coming and growing, it could be just 10 employees. We don't have too many companies that are over 25 employees. We've got a few large giants, and then most of them are under 10 to 20 employees. Now, these guys have 50 employees.
Juggernaut size for what you said, that's right.
But feel free to write to me, and depending on what's your area of interest, I'd be happy to share, which companies would be good ones to apply to.
And the companies that are getting towards the size of Advanced Liquid Logic have started developing their own internship programs. Advanced Liquid Logic has one, Liquidia has one. So if you know that you want the super small entrepreneurial experience, then you can target that, but you can leverage some of the programs that are already in place at some of these more established companies to get into industry experience, where you're still going to have the entrepreneurial environment, but it's not going to be the same do it on your own. I mean, if you go into an internship in a 1, 2, 3 person company, then it's going to be a very different experience than if you go into something like Advanced Liquid Logic.
And by the way, I'm hoping Advanced Liquid Logic and Liquidia are both going to be applicants for the Industrial Fellows program this year, so you may have an opportunity.
Anyone with genomics experience, please apply. I'll give you 2 that I like, impartial observer companies that I don't have a whole lot to do with. I'm starting to get more and more familiar with this sequencing market, and it's really exciting. There are 2 companies kind of in the space, in the area. One is called Expression Analysis. It's a fee-for-service sequencing company. They're smart as hell and sequence just about everything and do microarrays and lots of different things and really get technology and are just rapid adopters of new stuff and just really sink their teeth into brand new technologies. It's pretty exciting. It's a pretty exciting space to be in, and the technology is moving so quickly and the science is advancing so rapidly. It's just a lot of fun to watch. And I think they're doing it the right way. Another one is Metabolon. I think they just have a really cool model. It's a whole different sort of omics strategy to look at metabolomics, so not proteins, not DNA, but everything else, which is has a significant amount to do with biology. So I know we tend to be a little genetic centric lately. So as a former geneticist, I get it. But you know, there's a whole lot more biology going on in there, and limited ways to analyze those things. So those are two hot ones that I really like lately.
Another thing that I would add too is that if you're interested more on the academia side, but still have an interest in entrepreneurship, you might try to find who some area key thought leaders are in a space that you're really interested in, and going and talking with them about some technologies that they may be in the process of or in the near future plan on spinning out into a startup company. And then if you do a postdoc in that researcher's academic lab, then when the time comes for that technology to spin out, you'd be well positioned to move into that company.
All right, we are a little past 10 o'clock, so let's thank our guests.